A few months back, you'll recall, I hope, because I hope you're listening, a fascinating interview that I held with the High Sheriff of Cheshire, Dennis Dunn. It was amazing to hear of the diverse work that he does to encourage and to work with organisations in the community and to work with organisations nationally as well and in universities. A very busy man indeed. The other day I was listening to a webinar presentation on a different subject. That is the subject of the awards which our new king gives to people who are making a difference in the community. The two people that were giving that presentation have the title of Deputy Lieutenants. That means that they support the work of the Lord Lieutenant, her name being Lady Redmond. So I'm honoured to be able to greet them today and to talk with them. The subject that we're going to talk about in detail are the awards which the King offers to people who have been particularly involved, most usually in a voluntary capacity, within our community. People that are making a difference. But before I do that, of course I want to introduce them. We have Susan Sellers.
Hello.
And we have Mark Cashin.
Hello.
Both working very, very hard and at the moment very keen to tell people listening how they might be considered for one of the King's Awards. But before we do that, can you explain what the job of a Lord Lieutenant is, when it was set up, a little bit of historical information about the role and where you fit into that?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting us here to talk about this. Lord Lieutenants were actually thought of by King Henry VIII, who appointed the first ones in 1545 to strengthen the military forces against invasion from France or Spain, and also to guard against internal revolt. Their role covered all military matters, and they were expected to raise an army in defence of their county and literally stand in for the king on the battlefield or elsewhere. The king also asked the Lord Lieutenants to look after state documents and to be their eyes and ears in the county. And that particular bit is quite important for reasons I'll come on to. In 1586, Queen Elizabeth I appointed Lord Lieutenants more widely in response to the threat of invasion from Spain. And by the time the Spanish Armada arrived in 1588, they'd been appointed in almost every county, and their role became permanent. By 1595, there were 29 English counties with about 17 Lord Lieutenants. And so by that time, because of the increasing workload, about 200 deputies were appointed across England and Wales. And today, if we race on through history, they don't have a role in raising an army. The Lord Lieutenant's role is still being the eyes and ears of our king. And indeed, our role as Deputy Lieutenants is being the eyes and ears across the county for the Lord Lieutenant, letting them know what is going on, what's of interest, what indeed during a royal visit might one of the royal family like to come and see.
So, just on that, is it you who will actually go and speak directly with King Charles and give him that information? Does it come through a network that you feed into? How does that work?
Well, we would feed into the Lord Lieutenant, and the Lord Lieutenant belongs to something called the Lord Lieutenants Association. So the Lord Lieutenants come together and they have a network directly into the royal family.
So she, Lady Redmond,
Yes.
is the principal interface with the King. You are there in a supportive role.
Yes.
She can't be everywhere at the same time.
Correct. So on big occasions, for example, Remembrance Sunday, many of the deputy lieutenants will be asked to lay a wreath on behalf of the Lord Lieutenant, who in turn is laying a wreath on behalf of the Sovereign. And interestingly, the Lord Lieutenant is appointed until their 75th birthday, as are deputy lieutenants.
I've missed my opportunity.
I'm sorry about that, Vic.
Right, okay, so we've got a very good idea of what it is that you do. So, Mark, you basically do a similar sort of work. You work as a team.
So, as Susan said, there are a number of deputy lieutenants, and we all take on different roles. We all come together for things like Remembrance Sundays, but my particular lead is on the King's Award for Voluntary Service, which I think we're going to talk about in a bit. Susan leads in a different area, which I'm sure she'll tell you all about as well.
Okay, so the purpose of meeting you today, obviously, is to talk about these awards. There are a range of them, and I'm sure we'll go through them step by step. These awards, in the main, are for either individuals or for organisations that are working very often, most and usually in a voluntary capacity within the community. Would that be correct?
Yes.
So start thinking, do you actually know of somebody? If you do, first thing you've got to do is not tell them, basically. But there are people you can tell, because you will know that there is somebody who is really making a difference in the community, has probably done it over a period of time, and you think they're worthy of some recognition. That's what we're talking about today. So at this point, you're not going to hear a lot from me. I'm going to be sitting here listening, and you'll hear the two voices of Susan and Mark as they explain the three sorts of award, the nature of the award itself, what its name is, and what it bestows upon a person, and also, most importantly, the criteria by which somebody could be proposed. So the floor is yours, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Well, as Mark mentioned, he's the lead for the King's Award for Voluntary Service, and I'm the lead Deputy Lieutenant for Honours. And as you might well observe, twice a year, at New Year and the King's official birthday, we have honours lists. And there's usually a large list of people in the newspaper, and on the television they'll tell you about a famous footballer or an actor, actress who gets an award. But about 70% of those awards go to people working in the community, making a difference to other people's lives. Mm-hmm. The Cabinet Office, who are one of the two government organisations who handle awards, have a leaflet called Do Something Amazing Today for Someone Amazing. So we're talking about people really making a difference in their community. It doesn't matter how young or old they are. There's no upper or lower age limit. They should have been doing the work probably for at least 3 years. And without somebody to nominate them, nobody's going to know about this work that's going on.
Indeed, most people won't even know the mechanics of how they actually are recognised on a list which is put forward.
Exactly. So everybody who is on that list needs somebody to nominate them. And this is where we're particularly asking for your help. Mm-hmm. Do you know anyone, and would you be able to nominate them? We'll give the addresses of the websites, etc. at the end of this. To nominate them, you need to know what they're doing pretty well, and you mustn't tell them, as you've already mentioned. So what we want to know is, what has their contribution been? What impact have they made? What were things like before? What are things like now? So can we really see the difference this individual's made to their community? And they are special honours. They're awarded by the King himself. And so therefore the difference they make has to be exceptional. They've got to be very special people.
What actually are those honours, and is there any difference between them?
Yes, they start, if you want to go top down, with either a knighthood or a damehood. Then we go to a CBE. then an OBE.
So CBE is Commander of the
Commander of the
British
British Empire, Order of the British Empire, Member of the British Empire, and British Empire Medal. And if I tell you that in the last 5 years, 190 Cheshire residents have been awarded one of those honours. By far the majority have been either British Empire Medal or Member of the British Empire. Slightly more Member of the British Empire than British Empire Medal, because those are people really putting a huge amount into their communities and volunteers, as you say. But it is possible to nominate someone for their paid job if they're going way above and beyond what you'd expect somebody to be doing in that role. So really you've got to look at what their job description is, or what would you expect them to do? Well, this person's doing way more than that. This person has thought of something that's going to really ripple effect across other people doing that same job. They've innovated, they've done something special. And I think that brings me on to the third point. So we've got contribution, impact, and evidence. So the nominator needs to be able to show in either facts, figures, or financial information what difference that person's made. In other words, give some hard evidence. And that might be they've won another award. Congleton Mayor might give an award, and that's something you can say, well, this person's already been recognised locally, but we think they should be recognised nationally.
So they are exceptional people in a way, but that doesn't mean to say they can't be just an ordinary person who is
doing exceptional
things. I think that's probably the way to sum it up, isn't
Absolutely. So what we would do with the nomination is you can actually nominate a family member. The only thing you can't do is nominate yourself. In order to do the nomination, you fill out a form, much as I've described, but you need at least 2 letters of support from other people. And it's really important these other people really know the person. So if you've got somebody in the community who has started a charity or is working for a charity delivering something special, you might ask the founder of the charity, and you might ask somebody who benefits from the services. You might actually find somebody who is actually quite well known in the community, but they've got to be more than just a name on a letterhead. They've got to really know what service this individual's doing and why they're so special.
Yes, it'd be tempting to think, oh, well, I'll go and find the MP and get the MP to write a letter, or I will get the town mayor to write a letter.
Correct.
Simply because they're the town mayor. That's not what you're looking for.
No.
You're looking for that person who really has known what that person has done, and ideally also has experienced something of what that person's done. That's the ideal sort of person to back it.
You've absolutely got it, Vic.
Good.
Now, can I just mention one other point? One of the reasons that honours fail, one of the most common reasons, is that people only think of nominating someone when they've retired. So you might have someone who's done wonderful voluntary work all through their adult years, and they've retired, and somebody thinks, golly, that person needs an honour. It's too late. We really do need to nominate them while they're still active in whatever they're doing. You can use the previous things they've done as background, but they still need to be doing something.
So does it absolutely cut off at that point, or can they have been retired by a couple of years or so?
No, just 1 year.
1 year.
It has to be within a year of them finishing the activity. And people say, well, how long does it take to get through the system? And normally 18 months to 2 years.
Okay.
So really, please, if you can think of anyone, please nominate. But it's not a quick process.
So your role in that obviously is to receive those applications, or not?
No, they go directly to the Cabinet Office. The Cabinet Office has a very small staff, and they can't possibly do what we call due diligence. And so each lieutenancy has honours panels who do the due diligence. And they will look at the nomination. They might seek some further information from the nominator if it's relevant. And they will actually provide a recommendation to the Lord Lieutenant. And she will then make her decision finally, and she will send that back to the Cabinet Office. However, the lieutenancies do not decide who gets an award. In London, they have things called SIFT panels. There are 2 SIFT panels for voluntary work because that's where the bulk of the nominations comes. There's a SIFT panel for sport. There's a SIFT panel for other activities. And they actually are the ones who make the decision. Make a recommendation, that goes to the Prime Minister, then it goes to the King, and he is the one who makes the final decision.
I see. So, as we said earlier on, and most importantly, the person who is being nominated must not know that they have been nominated. So, at what point might they hear in that timescale, and who do they hear from?
Well, that's quite interesting. I have a lovely friend who started a hospice, and she actually did receive an award, and a very official looking envelope dropped through her letterbox. She thought it was a speeding fine, so she wasn't too keen to open it. But when she did open it, there was the news that she had been awarded an MBE. But it's a very official looking envelope.
Indeed.
And of course, even when you've received it, I think you're not allowed to tell anyone until the publishing of the list. Mm-hmm. And if you receive an honour, the British Empire Medal is presented by the Lord Lieutenant in the county, but you'll receive 2 tickets to a Royal Garden Party. And for MBE or above, you'll be invited to either Windsor Castle, Buckingham Palace, to receive your honour directly from a member of the royal family.
Okay. Right, so we've covered quite a lot of information there. Can you just summarise that? I think there are obviously 3 points in terms of what makes a good application.
Yes.
And then what people need to do and what they definitely don't need to be doing.
Well, I think the best way to explain it is actually there's a lot of information coming out, and it's all on the Cheshire Lieutenant's website, the Lord Lieutenant's website. And I know we're going to give the address at the end, but if you Google Cheshire Lord Lieutenant or Lord Lieutenant of Cheshire, there's a website.
We better explain how to spell Lieutenant, because somebody, particularly if they come from America, will be putting in Lieutenant, and who knows how to spell that.
Absolutely. So it's Lieutenant. That gives quite a lot of information and help about making a nomination. And to make it even easier, if you feel that you'd just like to talk to somebody about it, we offer a mentor scheme. And you speak to the Lord Lieutenant's clerk or email him, the address is there, and a mentor will be provided.
They will assist in the sense that they're not going to write it for you.
No.
They're not going to amend it as such, but they might say, you've missed out something, or you've put something in.
Have you thought of this?
Have you thought of this?
Have you thought of that? I mentored somebody recently, and all the information was there, but it wasn't quite in a memorable and persuasive story. So it was about just reordering the information.
I played all the notes, but not necessarily in the right order.
In the right order.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So we can help, and we're doing that to encourage people, please, to make nominations.
Deadlines.
You can make a nomination at any time. It's a rolling process.
Okay. So there's no cut-off date in this?
No, it carries on, because if you miss one, there are 2 lists a year. As I say, it takes 18 months to 2 years to go through the system. Mm-hmm. But so just any time.
So, listeners, you will know of people out there that you think are worthy of what is probably the finest award you will ever receive in your life, unless you're in military service. Nevertheless, this is a great honour to receive this award, and it is something which you deserve. because of the sheer amount of effort you have put into making a difference for other people. So do listen to this, but then most important is a call to act. It would be tempted to say, I can do it any time. Believe me, if you take that attitude, you'll probably not do it. You probably need to be thinking now and take the decision, write it in your diary, going to submit an application for Mr. or Mrs. X, or even Master or Miss X, to the system. They're going to have to wait 2 or 3 years before they actually know whether they have been selected and recognised, but do it. Don't just listen to this programme and think how interesting it was. It's a call to do something. Let's turn to the second of the awards, and this is Mark's area, and that's the King's Award for Voluntary Service.
Similar to Susan, we're here today to try and get your support, actually, because this is an incredible award. Actually, without people nominating organisations, nobody will ever get it. And a brief history of the award, it's existed for just over 20 years, and it was previously the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service. It was introduced by our late Queen in her Golden Jubilee year. And it is described as the highest award that a voluntary organisation can receive in the United Kingdom. It has the equivalent of an MBE, but it is awarded to the organisation rather than to the individuals. And it is awarded to that organisation for life. I'm going to talk in a moment about some of the requirements to be nominated for it, but just the actual logistics of what it is. So it's awarded by the King, but it's presented locally by the Lord Lieutenant, and as well as a physical award and a hand-signed certificate from the King, it also comes with 2 Royal Garden Party invitations for the organisation to use to send people that have been involved in that organisation to Royal Garden Party as part of the recognition. It does differ, has lots of similarities to the honour system, but it differs critically, particularly in one way, and that's that actually the organisation has to know it's nominated. Whereas with an honour, it's a complete secret. And the reason it has to know that it's nominated is because it has to agree to be nominated. Because when I talk about the process of achieving it, there's some work for the organisation as well. Nominations are very easy. We will give you the website at the end. It's simply a matter of going onto the government website, registering, writing a nomination, and it also requires 2 supporting letters. And those supporting letters need to be for beneficiaries of the organisation that's being nominated. And that's really important. And those letters are very important. And similar to the honour system, we provide a mentoring system that if an organisation or the nominator for an organisation wants some assistance, they can go onto the Cheshire Lieutenancy website, go through the clerk to the Lord Lieutenant, and he will direct you to one of us who will then provide support in that nomination. But as you said before, we won't write the nomination. We will just give some steer as to the sort of things that are in there. And actually, critically, and similarly to the honour system, evidence is key. Mm-hmm. Evidence is very, very important. Mm-hmm. But also, similar to the honour system, it has to talk about what's exceptional. What is exceptional about that organisation? There are some quite hard and fast rules as well for the King's Award for Voluntary Service, which it's worth me just touching on, because there's some wonderful organisations out there, and quite often by virtue of how they've evolved or where they are in their evolution, they're not eligible either at this time or won't be in the future. So to just run through a number of the absolute requirements. So you have to be nominated by somebody who isn't a volunteer or a paid member of staff. But clearly that individual needs to know the organisation and needs access to the beneficiaries and needs access to the organisation, because they've got to tell the organisation.
When you say volunteer there, is that a volunteer in any element of the work that they do? So it is pretty broad in that. Yep. Your working could be in the assistance of people that are suffering with cancer from something like that. Yep. If, however, you are one of the assistants in providing help in that organisation as a volunteer, you nevertheless are part of the organisation. Right. You've got to be almost a recipient of that service.
Or know the organisation.
Or know the organisation.
Yes. Absolutely.
Well, perhaps through somebody else that you know that's involved in it.
Absolutely. And that could quite possibly be a family member.
Indeed.
It's just somebody that needs to know the organisation well. The organisation needs to have existed for at least 3 years as well. And it can be quite small. It needs to have a minimum of 3 members, 3 volunteers in that organisation, but it can equally be almost as big as you want, but there's a caveat to that. It has to be volunteer-led. So it can be an organisation that's got lots of paid members of staff, but there need to be more volunteers, and critically, it's the volunteers that set the direction of that organisation.
So they set the policy, they will look at the budget, and they will make decisions on the budget and priorities.
They need to, in effect, have the casting vote in any critical decisions for the organisation. They can have paid staff within that organisation.
So can you give some examples of the sorts of organisations which fit the bill?
Food banks have been successful. There are individual specialised scout groups, support groups for newspapers for the blind. There have been local radio stations that have achieved it, that provide a particular function. All of the winners are actually on the Cheshire Lieutenancy website. There are a stunning number of voluntary organisations across Cheshire, and it's very possible for 2 organisations provide a similar service to be nominated and to be successful, but actually it's probably more likely if you're a diverse organisation that does something different that meets all of those criteria as well. And there's another absolute criteria in there. It sounds like a technicality, but I'll explain it to you. And that's you have to provide a direct benefit to the community. And what that means is, so if I give you a scenario, if you're an organisation that supports disabled people in your community, you would be eligible if you met all the previous criteria. But if you're an organisation that fundraises for that organisation, you're not providing the direct benefit to the community. You're providing direct benefit to an organisation that does. And whilst that organisation might be eligible, you're not. And it's a really important distinction that the awards require. And then there's a number of must-nots as well. So the award is awarded for life, so you mustn't have been awarded before. So there's no point applying again if you've already received the award. And similarly, if you've been nominated in the previous 3 years and were unsuccessful, then it's 3 years before you can actually reapply to be considered again. And the hope is that in that period of time, you would have been mentored, and whatever reasons, if they were possible to overcome, have been overcome in that period of time. Now, there are a couple of other criteria that I need to explain slightly. So you cannot be a national organisation or contained within a public service unless you have your own unique identity. So if you are an organisation within a public service that exists in its own right, does its own funding, makes its own decisions, and isn't at the beck and call, or rather at the direction of the parent organisation, you are eligible. And I can give you a bit of an example. So my previous organisation was Cheshire Fire and Rescue Service. It had around 250 volunteers and about 1,000 paid staff. So for starters, the number of staff outweighed the volunteers by far too many. But equally, although those volunteers do a brilliant job every day, they're not setting their own direction. It's set by the organisation. And that's a really important distinction. So they would need to set their own direction to be eligible for the award. So as you can see, there are a lot of requirements that narrow the focus, hence the reason that we're so keen for people to contact us to see if they can help us find organisations. And then the very final element that is also a disqualifier is you cannot be solely about caring for animals. You can be an organisation that cares for animals, and I'll give you an example, as long as it does something else. So if you were, for instance, an organisation that cared for animals that were then used to support people who had something like PTSD, that would be a broader benefit and you would be eligible. But if it was purely about the animals, that would unfortunately disqualify you. Just touch on the timescales as well, if I can. So it is a shorter process than the honours system, but not massively shorter. It's probably about 16 or 17 months, and there is a window where, unlike the honours system where you can nominate anybody at any time, there is a window that opens, and it opens on June the 1st every year, and it closes on September the 15th. Now, a bit like your advice to listeners before, put it in your diary. If you've got an organisation in mind, put it in your diary that you're going to nominate them on June the 1st. Equally, if you'd like some advice, with plenty of time between now and June the 1st, look at the Cheshire Lieutenancy website and you'll be pointed in the direction of a mentor, which will probably be me, to advise you on how to do that nomination. Not write it for you, but on how to do it. What then happens is those nominations go into a panel at central government. They are sifted and they return to the lieutenancy for us to do a local assessment. so which hence the reason the organisation needs to know that it's nominated. So what would happen then is 2 qualified deputy lieutenants would visit that organisation and would go through lots of criteria to assess them, but it's also an opportunity for the organisation to explain what it's about and what it does and why it's exceptional. And then that report ultimately is critiqued again at Cheshire level through the lieutenancy, and then goes to government, goes through a judging panel, and is finally signed off by the King. And the announcement is just once a year, and that's on the King's birthday, which is November the 14th. I think that's probably it in a nutshell, but I'm very happy to take any questions.
I'm sure you have answered it more than adequately. You've probably explained it a number of times as well. You've obviously mentioned certain organisations that are excluded. There are, in the real world, issues with religious organisations in some occasions. Presumably, if their work is about the community, then that's fine. If their work is solely about convincing other people that they should follow that faith, that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
We're talking about
Absolutely.
their work in the community, but it doesn't exclude them.
But they could very well be delivering a very important voluntary function made up of volunteers that are constituted as a voluntary organisation and delivering a remarkable service to the community. So that wouldn't make them ineligible unless it was the first criteria that you named, that it was primarily about their core function.
Yeah. So somebody who is knowing the organisation will approach that particular organisation and say, would you wish to be considered? They then go on to the website where there is the framework for who is eligible, who is not, the evidence that's to be provided, and that really starts the process. But even after that, then there is a shaping of that process, and there's an interview with the organisation to clarify that. There is.
I wouldn't want to overcomplicate the task in hand for the nominator. The nominator needs to know the organisation and needs access to 2 beneficiaries. Registration on the website is probably about 5 minutes. I would suggest that a good nomination can be created in an hour or 2. A very good, and particularly if you sought the advice of the lieutenancy, I think we could give some structure and advice on how that nomination should look. But it's not a hugely onerous task for the nominator.
And in summary, I guess that information is a good story, an interesting story about an organisation making a solid and sustained contribution to individuals or groups within the community.
That's a fabulous summary, yes.
That's it. Okay, I think I've got that. The third element that you're involved in is the joyous invitation to a garden party.
Yes.
That is a lot like, we hope that the King will be well enough very soon to undertake that part of his role. How does that process actually work, invitation to garden parties?
Well, you're right, Vic. It is considerably less onerous, but there's no reason actually why you can't decide to nominate an individual for an honour, but in the meantime put their name forward for a royal garden party. And we're beginning to sound a bit like a record ourselves, but actually if you go on the Cheshire Lieutenancy website, you can download a form and you'll be asked the nominee, again, please don't mention it to the nominee because competition for places is high, but you will be asked the name, email address of your nominee and a short paragraph about why you think they deserve this highly prestigious invitation, and a little bit about yourself. So they want to know why, who you are, a little bit about you. That then is submitted to, again, Robin Roberts, who is our clerk to the lieutenancy. And when at the due time, you can submit one of those forms at any time of year. But I believe that actually the invitations have just gone out now. But, they like to store them up over the year, and then they'll decide who they think perhaps are the most worthy recipients and approach the recipient. If they want to accept the invitation, who would they like to take with them? And that's how it works.
And relatively simple, but again, it's thinking of that person who was Meritorious, there's a word.
And actually saying why. Just a simple paragraph about why they're so special and why this would be a wonderful, I suppose you could term it, reward, recognition for the fantastic work that person's doing.
Well, again, it's a life experience, isn't it? You are actually going to be in the presence of monarchy.
Yes.
It's not unlike the situation, actually, and I go off piste here very, very slightly. My cousin Anne, who's sadly died a couple of years back, she worked within the royal household. She was an expert on the life of Mountbatten.
Oh, wow.
And so she was carrying out research in that respect. Right. And, of course, as a young child, I was really impressed with the fact that Anne knew the Queen and had been inside Buckingham Palace. Very, very much so. So actually, when she died, I did actually write to the royal household and inform them that sadly she had died. And of course I was delighted to get back the official letter, which I passed on to her surviving family, which recognised the work that she had done to be an archivist for the Mountbatten family.
That's a lovely story.
There we are. That's my
lovely.
off-piste story for today. So, we have 3 awards there, and again, I'm just going to encourage anybody who's listening to get your thinking caps on, but also to get your doing caps on. Don't put off the work of actually putting something in, even though in one respect there isn't a deadline to doing it, the awards themselves. You are recognising a very, very special person or organisation. Now, you said that obviously you're going to give the contact information out. We have a Facebook page, Congleton News and Views, so we will add it to that, so people needn't suddenly rush for a pencil and paper. If they're lucky, this programme will be repeated a number of times anyway. But if you would like to just say how people can find these vital websites, and then hopefully in the next few weeks you will be inundated with response.
Thank you very much, Vic. Well, for honours, it's www.gov.uk/honours, all lowercase. For the Cheshire Lieutenancy website, it's www.cheshirelieutenancy, all one word, .org.uk, all lowercase. And for the King's Award for Voluntary Service, it's kavs.dcms.gov.uk. But that's a bit of a mouthful, so if you were just to go into your Google search engine, or whichever one you use, and put Honours, or King's Award for Voluntary Service, or Lord Lieutenant of Cheshire, you will in due course get to the relevant website.
I'm bound to ask you now, does Alexa recognise it as well?
Oh, I don't know.
I bet Alexa does. I bet if you went onto Alexa and said, find me the Honours site, I bet you would find it. Alexa would certainly know how to spell either Honours or Lieutenant.
Yes.
Both challenging words,
well,
actually.
it is, because a lot of our machines do American spellings. So Honours doesn't have the U in it that we would have.
Yes.
So you're right.
Yes. I had a conversation the other day with some of my Ukrainian friends.
Right.
The complications of the English language is words that sound the same but are spelt differently, words which are spelt the same which have got different meanings.
Yes. It can't be very easy learning our language, actually.
I did point out we got a decent, simple character set. Listen, it's been delightful to meet the two of you in person. It's fantastic, the work you do. I mean, like so many of these things, they happen, and most of us don't have a clue as to how they happen, who is involved behind that. And I can recognise you give up a lot of your time, a lot of your life to actually fulfil the role that you have been invited to carry out. So I'm going to say thank you very, very much for the work that you do. This really is the opportunity for anybody who is listening to recognise those people that deserve recognition and who will, I know, be absolutely delighted either to receive the honour which the King can bestow upon them, or indeed to be able to receive something as part of the organisation that they have been working for in an unpaid volunteer capacity.
Thank you, Vic. Well, we're volunteers ourselves, so we want to just do whatever we can to encourage recognition of all volunteers. We're incredibly lucky in Cheshire. We have fantastic, vibrant volunteer activity, and let's just find a formal mechanism of saying thank you to those people.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Vic.